Welcome to another episode of Round the Table. This one is about TTRPGs on the bleeding edge, or innovation in tabletop role-playing games. Got a fantastic lineup today for you of some very big brains. I just hope that I can keep up. So we'll see how that goes. In any case, I also wanted to acknowledge that this is the first time, a first for Round the Table, where we have a 4-continent podcast. So we'll that's a pretty cool thing too, I think. But in any case, my name is Syzer. I'm your host. Pronouns are he, him. I am the creator of the TTRPG Skies of Fortune, and I'd like to introduce you to the rest of our panel today. Let's start with Fede.
Okay, I'm Fede. I'm an Argentinian games designer. Pronouns are they, them. She, her, too. And yeah, that's basically it. I go by I have a company called Arcana Media. It's based in the UK, but I'm living in Argentina. And yeah, that's me.
Gotcha. And you're the game that you're best known for is probably Zephyr, right?
Zephyr and Nibiru. Yeah.
Cool. All right, and then we got Thomas.
Yeah, hello. Hi, I'm Thomas Manuel, he, him. I'm one of the people behind Rascal News, which is a role-playing game-focused website, which everyone should check out. I also run the Indie TTRPG Newsletter, which is a weekly newsletter, kind of roundup about games. And I also do the Yes Indeed podcast, which is a game design interview show.
Cool. Thank you for being here today, Thomas. And then we have Liz.
Hi there, I'm Elizabeth Little, Liz for short. I'm a physics teacher from the UK and amateur game designer. I think most people probably know me from You All Die in This Place, which is sort of my current game.
Cool. And she, her pronouns, I believe.
She, her, yes.
Okay. So let's get into our discussion of, innovation in TTRPGs, right? This is definitely a good crew to talk about this with. So when we talk about innovation in tabletop role-playing games, what are we really talking about? What's the scope of the discussion? Just kind of define our terms here.
Okay.
Yeah,
Anybody can jump in if who would like to.
Yeah, sure. I think that if you sort of look at the history of tabletop RPGs, at least if you take the cut from the modern thing where chainmail and D&D originated, it kind of originated in a very sort of constrained set of places in the US. If you've read, there's a very good researcher called Aaron Trammell. I think he actually featured a little while ago in Rascal. He wrote a couple books. The one before the last one he wrote was called The Privilege of Play, and it kind of tracks the sort of places where TTRPGs, D&D, chainmail, etc., where they came from. Hobby departments in Ivy League universities where people are doing railway modeling, and then hobby stores start popping up around the railway modeling scene and all that stuff. And that kind of drives into D&D and the sort of ideological DNA that it has, and how over the decades it gets established, and the dominance of D&D, not really as a product, because D&D dwindles from decade to decade, and there's times when it goes down and up, etc. But more or less the bones, design-wise, of D&D don't really change that much over the years. And I think that, well, you can talk about innovation in a lot of different ways, in terms of the elements of play and the people that get to participate in the TTRPG industry from this content or from that culture or something. I think there's usually a through line of how much something is deviating from the canon of tools that we receive from that D&D-esque tradition. But at least that's how I look at it. I don't know how the rest of the people here do.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at it. You have this kind of what we might call traditional games, which certainly come from that sort of background that you were talking about. And yeah, I suppose my view would be innovation really is going to be anything which is straying away from any aspect of that kind of what we would call traditional design.
Gotcha. So maybe less simulationist, would you say, or?
I think it could maybe go either way. It's just just anything which is just straying from that way which things are typically done. So it could be even perhaps more simulationist in certain aspects, but I would say probably generally going in the opposite direction as you would suggest.
Yeah, I think the idea of talking about innovation in role-playing games is really interesting because, I mean, there are a group of people who don't believe that like innovation is possible, right? Like, and what I mean by that is like in a very kind of like ideological sense of like, hey, what does innovation mean in art in general, and like so on. With like RPG specifically, I think it's interesting to tease apart people who are like, oh yeah, role-playing games are very similar to what we were doing 50 years ago. You know, some of the details might have changed, but it's fundamentally the same thing. And the people who are like, no, actually what we're doing now is quite like fundamentally different, like the ways in which it's different are what's important and things like that. So you'll often find people kind of sort of talking past each other when it comes to like what is innovation and like what counts, right?
It's going to be very different from different perspectives, isn't it?
Yeah.
Well, do you think that when innovation may come down to questioning, what's come before and taking things in a different direction, are there any particular trends or institutions that you like to question when you are doing your own games?
Yeah. I think that like as we just said, like innovation is like something that like it's kind of gonna be discussed. Like some people are going to have the criteria of like, oh no, like look at how much I don't know, the inclusion of new game elements in play has changed. That means innovation. We've used like Jenga towers, where the game that I was looking at today is using Scrabble tiles and stuff like that. That's innovation, etc. Well, at least personally, for my criteria, generally, what I wanna see is different stories being told. Because I think that like whenever, this is my opinion, like maybe you guys have a different perception of it, but since we're all passionate about these games, I think that one of the big things that strikes us when we first come into contact with TTRPGs is the sheer scope of the space of imagination that opens up. You come, maybe you played like video games and stuff, and you come into contact with TTRPGs and you're like, oh my god, everything's possible here.
Oh yeah, suddenly you can do anything. Yeah, it's all descriptive, isn't it?
Yeah. And so I came into that conclusion, but at the same time, as I started playing more games, more like the cultural background, like being from Latin America, and of course, and the history that we've had, I was like, why are we telling usually the same stories though? If you go to the big names, like D&D, Pathfinder, etc. Like for me, the stories and the sort of like roles you play, the methods characters do to basically solve situations, and the things they build their identities on, just usually violence, was usually kind of like the same to me. So at least my idea of innovation personally started to like go through that, how to address the fact that in a way, when we design things that are complex, we tend to make power fantasies and the fantasy of violence more mechanically complex. And while we do start to create new alternatives where we explore different sides of the human experience, those games tend to be more simple. They tend to take a more like, they tend to be labeled narrative, or they go more rules light, and they experiment, and it's pretty cool. But it seemed weird to me, and I had this conversation several times with other people, that apparently people have a hard time imagining complex mechanical games where identities are built up of something that is not related to enforcing power and enforcing violence and building identities based on that. But that's what I thought about it. Yeah.
Gotcha. So did you try and make more? I haven't read Zephyr yet, or Nibiru, but did you try and do that with those games?
Specifically for Zephyr, yes.
Okay. Well, that makes me more interested to read it now, for sure. Well, let's see. How about you, Liz? With your you will die in this place. Were there any particular things that you were trying to do differently with that game? I mean, reading through it, it's not your, even the presentation is not your typical thing, right? It's kind of an art piece because you have, or what we would normally recognize as more of an art piece, because you have these narratives peppered in, you have some very interesting graphic design in it. I mean, what were you trying to question or do differently with that game?
Yeah, so I guess I had a few different sort of things going on sort of when I was thinking about that initially. I suppose like the core kind of thing that started the ball rolling on it was just this idea about how, as an indie game creator and someone who collects and plays and uses a lot of indie games and is involved in that space, I'm certainly always looking for interesting ones at conventions. There is just sometimes this difficulty in actually bringing them to the table and actually playing them. And despite that, I have a shelf full of books that I really enjoy, some of which I've never actually gotten around to playing yet. And I was just thinking in terms of how can I bring something to that which is going to add value, even if this thing isn't actually being used to play. So whether that's bringing elements of literature, whether that's bringing elements of art, graphic design, philosophy, I just wanted to have something in this game which makes it just, I suppose, more than just a game in terms of something you can play. There are so many things, so many games that I have on my shelf that I love reading through, and I would love to play them with a group at some point. But it's just difficult to do that. So yeah, I really wanted to kind of emphasize that side of the product.
Oh, cool. Like even if you don't necessarily play it, you're still trying the people that read it at least can get more out of it, is what I'm
Yeah, I wanted it to be an experience that you can take from that, even just from reading it. Like, it is still a game designed to be played, and like this is kind of like bizarre to me at the moment. There was a guy emailing me just the other day. He's been running You Will Die in This Place at a con as just like people sign up and play, and he emailed me to ask for some maps, like some high resolution maps for the sort of the first scenario kind of bit, so he could print them out. But yeah, no, it's just kind of wild to me that just like D&D players who've never played anything like this before have signed up to play You Will Die in This Place, and apparently have had a great time playing through, which is just weird to me. But yeah, he printed out some of the narrative elements of it and some of the little essays and things which are in there, and he put them in a shoebox in the middle of the table for the players to read, which I thought was just wonderful.
It's nice when you can surprise players with a new experience that even they didn't know they wanted.
Oh, that's really cool. The shoeboxes.
I know, I love that idea.
It's amazing. Yeah. I also love the idea that maybe like players, like when it's not their turn, are just busy reading fiction. Like,
yeah, exactly. No, it's just really cool.
Yeah. I think Liz's work, You Will Die in This Place, is a really great example of a thing that is happening now as a trend. Again, innovation is a weird word. It's a very, for me, it's like it's primarily like a word used in like tech circles and things like that. So
Sure.
I'm not sure that's like, it doesn't come very naturally to me. But like, yeah, there is this this new sort of like practice of designing games where the text itself is doing something interesting, kind of like fictionally. There is a narratorial voice, there is an author, there is a kind of diegesis to the whole thing. That all of that stuff is really like interesting. Like the one I read most recently was Luke Jordan's Harvest, which is a kind of like, again, a beautiful text that you kind of read from start to finish, and you have like like you have a character, you have an author narrative with a point of view and stuff like that. Like, yeah, I really like that. This kind of thing that I think Jay Dragon has talked about, of this idea of like designing the book, right? The book is an experience to be like designed for, and things like that. I think that's interesting. That is a kind of new thing, and like Fede's work with Zephyr is also really interesting, because I think that's the whereas there is a lot of like, you know, book design and stuff like that in there, there is also this idea, like they said, of like pushing what kind of narratives we are talking about, because I think there is something extremely like ambitious. Fede hasn't kind of laid out what Zephyr is about, and like the cool that like, because it's so different, like it's like a challenging pitch to make as well, right? Like, I don't know if any, like, there's this thing of like the cool part of that game is you hear it and you go like, oh, like, yeah, without this game existing, I would not create that narrative necessarily. I wouldn't have that experience. I wouldn't have sat down by myself and like come up with that idea and tried to execute that, right? Like, I wouldn't be sitting at my D&D game and playing out that story or that setting and things like that. So yeah, I think those are really two like good examples of games that are of trends, I think, of like different kinds of innovation. Yeah, that I find exciting.
Cool. So, you know,
Yeah,
we're
there's a
talking.
thing. Yeah, sorry. I just wanted to. There's a thing. Also from like designer side, from You Will Die, that I think it was really cool when I was reading it. That generally, like, when you're designing a game, you enter into certain patterns where like information and you know, mechanical sort of like chunks get formatted in a way so that you may iterate that on how, like, for example, you take the game's archetypes in a traditional like standard game, and you know, like, they're presented with like this introduction that gives you like a, you know, like a fluffy thing, and then like a couple of mechanics that are like, you know, I don't know, 3 mechanical tidbits, etc. Some of that I thought was super cool of like You Will Die is how like drastically different each archetype is sort of like made. It kind of breaking through the idea of, you know, like, oh, there's a template that we're going to paste and like paint in different colors. Like, you're using entirely different play elements for each archetype, which was
like the dice
cool
and the deck of cards and
yeah.
various other things.
Exactly. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, I really enjoyed doing that and sort of just deconstructing how that goes, and even with some of them just playing around, with that voice of the narration, just like changing that completely. And it's just like, well, there are different ways that we can present the same information, and some of them are going to resonate with people differently, and maybe some work better than others. But it's just nice to play around in that space and maybe give other people ideas for how can they present information in a way that's going to be more enjoyable to access.
Yeah,
I think
totally.
asymmetry of class design, right? Like the fact that all of the, each character that you make is going to be playing a kind of like a different game mechanically. Like that asymmetry is either something that you think, oh, like it's like this is like a new thing, this is a thing that's happening now, or again something that someone would be like, oh yeah, 50 years ago we were doing that, right? Like there was no like like that thing exists, but there definitely was a moment in between the beginning and today where the sort of like preconceived like RPGs as a solved problem was the idea that you needed classes that were well balanced, and that was the norm, right? So there is definitely a very conscious thing now of like, hey, that norm might not be necessarily valid. Like there's a lot of like different like aesthetic experiences that you can have if you kind of introduce that asymmetry.
Cool. Well, we're talking about what things we can look at to change, but what about things that we'd prefer to stay the same? Are there any TTRPG sacred cows that must not be slaughtered, right? Are there things that we want to that we really want to hold over from, I don't know, maybe what Gygax and Arneson were doing, or what TTRPGs have come to mean in the last 10, 15 years or so? Or maybe there is none. Maybe you're fine with
Personally,
changing everything. I don't know.
personally, no. I think everything is up for grabs. I personally have hold on to, for example, the idea that there's going to be a narrator that has a different role, but that's just because I really like playing as that. I really enjoy games in which there's like these two roles. But then my favorite game, which is Dialect, is GM-less. I also enjoy that. It's just that in general, I really like the role of the narrator. And usually I think that if you're going to, because I really, really love like world building and doing a lot of like, work on designing weird stuff that is conveying the ideas that I want to convey. I think that the more you depart from the familiar in world building, the more having that sort of like GM role that can maybe act as a sort of like stepping stone from like the familiar into the weird is kind of functional to my design. But yeah, I think that's the only big thing.
Yeah, I kind of would agree with you on that one, and I think your world building point is a good one there, 'cause the more kind of different, unique, the more involved your world building is, it does put then quite a lot of like onus on whoever is running this and whoever is playing this to understand that and to be able to inhabit that. So if you do have that sort of one person who's really hooked into it, has that pinned down, knows what they're doing, and then they can ease the other players in from that sort of GM or narrator role, then that definitely helps with that kind of thing. Although again, like you say, like there are games that I very much enjoy that are GM-less, and it's certainly a space that I would perhaps explore at some point, even if it's not necessarily perhaps the way that I would usually do things. I suppose one element which, like, again, I kind of agree with Fede there. I don't really consider anything, I suppose, like sacred on this kind of front. If someone can do something interesting in a way that I hadn't seen before and then show that to me and convince me that, yeah, this is cool, I'll happily go along with that. But I suppose one element of TTRPGs does tend to be this kind of idea of, on some level at least, acting in turn. That might not necessarily be like an initiative order. It could just be going around the table. And I think part of that is just like, you respect people's time, you listen to people while they're talking. You're not all trying to talk over each other and do things at the same time. But I suppose similarly, if there is some system that someone comes up with where everybody is effectively acting at the same time and that works in a way, then I'm all on board for that as well.
Yeah, I think for me this question again is so connected to again how we think about innovation, because it almost again sort of like ideologically almost it has to be successful to be considered an innovation. You know what I mean? Like in the sense that people are always doing different things, but if they don't get mainstream success, like we wouldn't necessarily label it with that, right? There are always people doing inventive stuff with mechanics, inventive stuff with setting and things like that. But how we always kind of parse this is with commercial success. Like one of my favorite games recently was Caro Assertion's Last Train to Bremen, which is again sort of like a GM-less game, but it's also like built on Liar's Dice, which is older than and the D&D. It's almost like a folk game, and has almost a predefined narrative. Like it has all sorts of stuff that is not the same thing that people were doing 50 years ago, but also when you look at it happening at a table, it looks functionally the same. It's like a bunch of people sitting around, they take turns talking. Like, what exactly is the big deal? But yeah, I guess this this again kind of like goes back to that question. And I think Caro is another good example of a designer that is constantly like doing like different and interesting things. Yeah.
Cool. So let me ask you this. Say I am a TTRPG hipster. Okay. I want to get out there. I want to be up there with what's cool. I really want to experience what new stuff is out there so I can brag about it to my friends later. What do you think is a good place for me to start? You know, I'm being a little glib here, but what games do you think, or what designers do you think that person should check out? Should they stay in the indie scene? Should they be looking at small, quote unquote, smaller like tier 2 developers? Or where should that kind of person be looking for the next new interesting thing?
Yeah, how to impress all of your indie RPG friends? Like, just like
Right.
there's so many of them, and we have to solve this problem.
I know, it's
how
like
to make them think we're cool.
I've been saying for a while. I haven't been in this space, I think, as long as many as you have, or as long as the rest of you have. But I've learned very quickly that the indie TTRPG space is more of an ocean than a pond. You know, there's a lot to see out there.
I don't think I'm the right person to answer this.
Okay.
It's like I don't get to read that many TTRPGs. I do run into like really interesting stuff. I just think that like generally, at least from like a creator standpoint, to the degree that you yourself design stuff that you think is different in the ways that you care, you will run into that kind of people. You know, if you think that, you know, for you innovation is, I don't know, making a dungeon that is traversed with one of those like little things, you know, the things that you like folded papers that you do like this kind of thing.
Oh yeah.
And you're like, this is my innovation. Like I'm still doing a dungeon, but this is the way I innovate. And you start doing that, posting that. People that are interested in that kind of stuff, you know, will come up and be like, oh, look, this looks so cool. So I think that by doing stuff, you will run into. But that's from a designer point of view. If you're like going in and you're just like a player somewhere and interested, I have no idea how you enter that. Definitely in the scene, of course, but yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, it's like you look around conventions and things, you will see indie sellers selling all sorts of like interesting things, and I will try and pick stuff up there. But social media like Blue Sky, itch.io, there's so much stuff. But like Thomas was saying, like we tend to like these things become more pronounced by some kind of commercial success. So generally, I think you have to go looking if you really want to find these things. It's like I've got games on my shelf that's like. There's a game where it's a Finnish game where you're a circus performer, and there's like another game where you're a time traveler and you're speed running to like get the better time of killing Hitler and stuff like that. It's like there's all sorts of just like weird games out there. But yeah, I mean, if someone wanted to impress me with their indie game collection, I want to see something that I haven't seen before, and that would be the kind of thing that I'm looking for, especially if it does look really cool or have some interesting mechanic. I mean, otherwise if they show me some Jenna Moran games, I'll be pretty happy. But yeah.
Now there's some maybe
Jenna Moran is a cool shout.
Yeah. I forgot the name of the convention, but there's one that happens in New Jersey that's specifically meant to be a place where indie designers can test their games. Thomas, do you know what that is? Does that ring any bells for you? Yeah, I think that's it. Yeah, they had a presence at Gen Con this year too. That's where I first became aware of them. And also there is a thing that they goes around to various conventions where you I think it's indie games on demand, where you can just go and find developers there and who will run their game for you. So that's an option for folks. But of course you have to be at a con that they're at, and that's not a thing. But yeah, you probably, if you want to have your indie hipster cred, you probably need to be into places where maybe on Blue Sky. There's a lot of us on Blue Sky, I've noticed. So
I think the most interesting thing about the sort of like indie RPG, when you talk about cred, right, or the person who likes this stuff, is they tend to be somebody who enjoys like novelty, right? Like they like the idea intrinsically of like playing different games, of like having this kind of experience and then having another kind of experience. And that's a very like, that is like absolutely a question of like taste and personality and like mindset and stuff like that. Like if somebody and so yeah, if you are that kind of person, if you have a group that is that kind of group, and you have people like that, I think it is yeah, there are so many games. I could list out like games I like or people I like, but that always feels a bit weird because I would miss somebody out and it would be a
sure.
bit disappointing. But yeah, I mean, like this is also like all I talk about, right? Like in the sense that if you follow like my newsletter or podcast or Rascal News, like it is just this thing of like, oh, what's the most like you know, what's the most interesting thing I've seen recently? Like, what is the game? And all of these tend to be games that I play because I'm exactly that kind of person. Like, I actively try to like find groups and play these games with people. All of it tends to be online because again, that's much easier to find this very specific mindset of like, people who want to jump from game to game and don't find that difficult or annoying or onerous in any way. So yeah, I highly recommend like checking out any of the stuff that I do. And like if you have like a specific thing that you like, then you can kind of go from there to like other stuff, because a lot of the games that I tend to talk about are games in the sort of like, for lack of a better word, story game side of things, but there's a ton of like interesting like setting and adventure design and things like that I don't get to talk about, but that world also exists.
Yeah. Well, how about this? What's one of the more this is a question for all of you. What's the most, we've been talking about more interesting settings, or more settings that are more off the beaten path. What's just one that you've come across that you really that really stuck with you, or that really inspired you?
It's not really a game that's particularly interesting, at least for me in the design part, but I always really liked Changeling the Lost.
Oh, yeah.
That's a game that like, hit me, but when I started role playing, etc., like I really stuck to that game. I really like the idea. But yeah, that's probably the one for me. I haven't really sort of like being attracted to TTRPGs for their setting in general. To me, more what triggers like me liking a TTRPG has to do with like the design of it. But yeah, setting wise, probably that.
I'm just the opposite. Like one of the first things that really got me into TTRPGs was, back in the '90s, Monty Cook's Planescape setting, which was, it was D&D still, but it was like, the Mos Eisley Cantina by way of the Divine Comedy, and I really enjoyed that about it. And honestly, one of the things that I think I'm going to like about Zephyr and Nibiru when I read them is that they are, very different kinds of settings. At least that's the impression that I get from the the dust cover. So anyway, other interesting settings that people have come across.
I suppose for me, I mean, like Changeling is a great one actually, but I kind of have like, I suppose, two kind of like Grail games that I'm always looking to try and play whenever I can. One of which very rarely happens. The other one, a little bit more successful. But that would also be a White Wolf game for that one, which would be Mage, either the Ascension or the Awakening. I'll take either of those. But that's a game that I very much love in terms of just setting and just to play it. But the other one there, which I've not played in probably about 15 years, and I'm finally getting a group together to play it, hopefully, at some point. I've got at least like one person signed up, and I've finally managed to track down my old copy of the book, which is Nobilis.
Oh yeah, I have played a little
Oh,
bit of
yeah.
Nobilis. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have played Nobilis and I still don't know how to play Nobilis.
Yeah.
That's the cool experience of that game.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's
I've
awesome. I'm
played it back in uni and not since. I found literally managed to track. I've been looking for it for a while, but I found the old the Great White Book. Got it on my shelf now. Been reading through it recently. Got one person who's very keen to play it and another person who's interested, and I'm hoping I can finally play Nobilis again.
My experience playing Nobilis, maybe for folks who haven't seen it or played it, was that you're just a schlub who is like ascended to become like the essentially the god of a specific thing. Like it could be the god of 8-string guitars or the god of hedgehogs or something along those lines. And you have to use your specific domain to you have to keep it in line. You have to fight off these otherworldly beings that are trying to encroach on your realm of reality. It's a very fun, very interesting game. Yeah, has there been a recent edition of that? I don't know if there has been. Really.
I don't think so. I think
Yeah.
I have the second edition one, which came out in like I don't know, it must have been the early 2000s or something. But I
Yeah.
think there might have been a reprinting since then, but I don't think there's been anything else.
I think there is a third edition, but I think that's also from 20 years ago. I think it might have gotten
Okay.
facelift in terms of like design or whatever, but like it's even the latest version is an old game.
Yeah.
One setting for me that I really sort of like enjoyed that I played recently was again it's basically it's designed for Cairn, which is again like old school D&D. What you would not generally put it in the kind of innovative category like in that sense because whatever. But I think it's a phenomenal setting. I think it's a very innovative setting. It's called Beyond the Pale by Yohai Gal, and it is essentially a little adventure set in a town, but it's sort of historically based in the Pale settlement, which is a part of Russia in the 18th century, the 19th century, which is sort of like the borderlands of the Russian Empire, where was one of the few places that Jews were legally allowed to settle in and live. Residency in other areas was illegal at the time. So there is this. So Yohai, who is Jewish, has sort of like written this little setting. It's a great little adventure. I really enjoyed it. I'm going to be writing about it like soon, and it's got a lot of this sort of like very very clearly like Jewish like culture and stuff that is baked into it. There's a lot of drawing from folklore, a lot of drawing from wisdom tales, like morality, like stories and things like that. All of that is kind of like there in the way that characters talk and what they want and stuff, and all of that is really fun and interesting.
Cool. Well, Fede, I want to give you a chance here to get. I mean, since setting is not what you find exciting, how about system? What's a design or a system that really appeals to you?
Well, I actually like setting is like super exciting to me.
Is it okay? Maybe I misunderstood that.
As like from the point of like the signings, I just don't. I can't easily think of settings in TTRPGs that like motivated me. Unfortunately, like I don't know if unfortunately it's just the way things have gone. I don't feel myself very influenced by other TTRPGs. I vastly take influence from nonfiction. I read a lot of nonfiction, and that's what most influences my process. And other forms of maybe creative media, but TTRPGs not so much. Actually, for example, Changeling had a particular mechanic that I really liked, which was the pledge mechanic that I sort of rewired for the obligation system in Zephyr. So I take bits and bobs from here. It's hard for like for a game to really entrance me like as a system as a whole. Like I can mention, for example, I played this year. I played Mouse Ritter. I really like the way they were doing like inventory with little like item cutouts. So I took that and I sort of like rewired it and made it an add-on for Zephyr for carrying stuff, but more mechanically complex, and to solve an issue that I think the mechanic of encumbrance has had for like since it's existed. It's usually not a pretty fun mechanic to interact with. I want to make it fun. But I think that if it has to be one game that I'm like always excited to play, and I always end up being the GM for it, unfortunately, for the system as a whole, is actually Warhammer 3rd Edition.
Okay.
I think that that game is absolutely humongous.
Warhammer Fantasy.
Yeah, Warhammer Fantasy
Okay.
3rd Edition. If you don't know the story, I'll just briefly mention Warhammer First Edition, Second Edition, even Fourth Edition, the latest one, are very traditional, fantasy games. It's not Gygaxian fantasy. It's its own brand of like British fantasy. If you know Warhammer Fantasy, it has. It's really not about like it's not really heroic, though sometimes it has crisis of identity, that setting. But you're meant to be like, I don't know, an accountant, like a medieval accountant that suddenly has to do adventure, or like a guy that drives carts or stuff like that. Well, the thing is, like, it had a very sort of like traditional design from first and second edition, and then a third edition. The guy, I can't recall the name of the designer. Was it Jay Little, the designer of X-Wing? I can't recall the name. Well, he basically designed like this whole thing that was
Cantwell,
like.
Is that right?
I don't think so, but he might be like an associate designer. Anyway, it's just like it came in this huge box full of cards, and everything was in little like cards and trackers, and like all the dice were like weird dice symbols, things like that. It was so different from the second edition and the first edition. That was the first game I ever played. That I was like, okay, this is very ambitious, and people didn't like it. Like they didn't like it at all. They were like, what is this thing? This thing changed. I don't like change, kind of shit. And I was like, no, this is actually super cool. They took a like huge risk with doing this. They then went back, like that was on at the time when FFG had the Warhammer license. It went on to, I think, Cubicle 7, and Cubicle 7 did like basically 4th edition based on, I think it's Cubicle 7. I'm not sure. They did based on the older editions. But that game, that like humongous game full of like just cards and components that was super hard to track and to organize, became the basis of like FFG's Genesis system afterwards, because it was the first iteration of them using those weird dice with symbols and stuff like that. But yeah, I think that game I found particularly fun because of the system as a whole.
Cool. Never played that one, but yeah, that is an interesting leap that they took there.
Search for Google Images and just like look at how it looks. It's really bizarre.
All right, Google Images, Warhammer Fantasy 3rd Edition, folks. Cool. Wow, yeah. So, okay, here's a question. I want to talk about the TTRPG market a little bit. So, in general, when we're talking about innovation with games, do you think that the TTRPG market encourages or stifles innovation, or somewhere in between there? Does it encourage everything to be like a D&D like, or are we actually getting some interesting things out of some of these bigger developers, or what? I don't know.
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think that it's again one of those things that if you want to answer in the relative, then that becomes different if you want to answer in the absolute. Like just Fede was just talking about like edition wars, right? Like if the Warhammer third edition is radically different from second edition, there's a kind of inherent conservatism to these sort of like old games that people tend to like push back upon and stuff like that. But at the same time, yeah, I don't know if this is a popular opinion or not, but like right now the indie RPG scene is probably the most innovative it has ever been, in my opinion. Like I'm always like finding people like doing new things. Are they commercially successful? That is the answer is probably no. But again, like it isn't also that the whatever the mechanically safe games or the traditional games are like super commercially successful either, right? The factors that determine commercial success seem to be not necessarily like the innovation in the mechanics necessarily. So yeah, I think short answer, my opinion, yeah, the market does like stifle like this thing, but at the same time we're having this fantastic kind of diversity of indie games right now.
I'm definitely.
Yeah, I mean, I think.
Please go ahead.
Oh, that's right. I think that's it's kind of a difficult one for me because I should do, but I don't really even think about commercial success when it comes to just like designing games and doing things. It's just, I sit in my home, I come up with ideas I want to do, I design stuff, I throw them out into the world. Most of them don't get looked at, and then every now and again, something like You Will Die in This Place will get read by a few people, and suddenly, that's like the most popular thing I've done in a while. But it's just not even something that's on my radar when I'm sort of designing games. It's just I want to do what I do, and if it gets popular, it gets popular. If it doesn't, it doesn't.
Yeah, I think indie designers tend to like learn to be, or if they aren't already, like individualists who want to have their own thing out there, right? That's what I've noticed recently. I've been doing more interviews with indie TTRPG developers for a new podcast series I'm doing called Indie Spotlight, and they are the ones that really seem to have they have a vision of something they want to do, and regardless of commercial success, they would like it. They would like it out there. So, but yeah. And I appreciate that. I like the DIY spirit.
Yeah, it's like I at least for what I design generally, I think the environment is like deeply hostile to commercial success. Not that I like I don't design games to be commercially successful, nor for an audience. I think that there's like a very detrimental, at least to indies and to people that are more like doing this for like wanting to put their thing out there. I think there's a very detrimental sort of like worldview that you can have, that you have a target audience, sort of like that. Whereas at least in my experience, like if you just stick to whatever it is that you're trying to do consistently, like the target audience like will come to you. Like the people that like your stuff will come to you. And I think that's a much more at least a healthy approach in the long run. And I've seen a lot of people just burn out trying to be like, okay, identify these market trends, these ways of like designing games and going through them. While the space like commercially is very hostile to games that deviate from D&D, I think there's also like an opening in the fact that so many of the games that we've been seeing lately are very deeply tied to our sort of like cultural moment. If you think about like the COVID pandemic and the sort of like creeping atomization of society, that to me explains a lot how popular solo RPG has become. Like the loss of common spaces to play, etc. It's wild. Like I, for example, I see reviews from time to time of my games where people talk about, and I tried to play this solo, or I tried to make this work solo, or stuff like that. And I'm like sitting there, I never designed this to be played solo, but it's wild that so many people are trying to. And I think that there's lots of games that are coming out. There are solo games and channels, like promotion channels, channels through which you would get some degree of engagement and stuff like that. Are totally dedicated to that, and I think that's a sort of like different line that has sort of open, that is pretty much a reflection of the current social situation that we're in. But yeah, that's what I think.
Yeah, if we're talking about, if I step back a moment to talk about sacred cows, I think the one that I would never want to give up is having any game I create be anything other than a group game. Like, because it was always odd to me when I stumbled into like the sort of the public TTRPG scene a few years ago. I was like, solo games? What? I mean, that to me, that's like a thing that you do with video games, right? It's not something that you do with a pen and paper game. So I don't know. I don't like that trend necessarily, but I don't know. What do you think about it as a design space, folks?
Well, I'm writing like 4 different games at the moment, but one of them is a solo journaling game.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think that there's definitely room for expression and fun stuff in there. It's just not for me. Is basically what I'm saying. Yeah.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, it's I think yeah, you kind of found another of my sacred cows with that. I think in a way, if you take sort of like the social constructivist thing, where like what we create does then go on to spawn social institutions, and you're certainly facilitating a type of encounter, or a type of like if I'm making this game and you're buying it, I'm essentially setting you up to do something in your life which is going to be meeting up with people, and I really like that. That's kind of the thing that I want to foster. I want to get people together. I think there's also a bit of nostalgia there, because we all had different experiences of how we used to play TTRPGs. For me, it's nostalgia because like the time when I played the most by far was when I was like 20, 22, something like that, and we would meet together at like someone's house, and we would play from early on. We would stay over to sleep, and we would do this like binge, like 3 days straight of going from one house to the other, and just continue to role play as we went. And we would hang by like, I don't know, like a pool at someone's house. We would go get snack. We would come back. We would narrate for like 5 hours, and would play video games, narrate until the early morning, go to someone else's, and it's. I moved to the UK and tried to roleplay, and people didn't roleplay like that. At least where I was, and I was like, oh no, I like something very dear to me was lost. So I try to facilitate that, not that kind of thing, of course, because like it's very hard, but just people meeting up in real life. Yeah.
I think that's a really good motivation for like creating this kind of thing, to try and just like foster that kind of social activity, because it is ultimately the thing that I enjoy most about playing these games. I think sometimes I just take a little bit more pessimistic view on like how likely that is to actually end up happening. It's like, I think You Will Die in This Place is partly inspired by the fact that people are never going to actually play this, so let's make something that someone can just like read by themselves and still enjoy. But I think as a motivation, though, that's a great one.
Yeah, I think I definitely have those experiences of, playing like essentially just like a one-on-one game with my friends. Kind of like, it wasn't even where we just kind of made up rules as we went. They were kind of like pseudo proto RPGs before I ever picked up D&D, a D&D book. Good memories though. I hope that other people have memories like that they can call back, and even if not, make new ones with whatever games that you want to play, I guess. um
Yeah,
oh man.
one thing that I wanted to add is because I talked to a lot of like first-time designers or people that are starting out, and it's one thing that I'm always telling them, like, because the the act of getting together in real life has gotten so hard that people are starting to design with the preconception that their games are not going to be played.
Hmm.
Sometimes they even come with the perception that their games aren't even going to be read, and I think that has a sort of like, I don't know if detrimental is the word, but maybe it is, an impact on the way games are designed. And it's kind of sad to see. I think that in a way, like, kind of the opposite is ideal, at least for me. Like, what I tend to tell these people is like, design for the social space that you want to like facilitate. Do not design by the thing that is societally being imposed on you,
Mm-hmm.
this isolationist thing. Like, if there's some way we're going to get out of this is by creating more spaces or facilitating more spaces for people to get together, not by adhering to this creeping isolationism
Yeah.
that's happening. Yeah.
Oh boy, Thomas, do you have any thoughts on that? You've been kind of thinking for a little bit here.
No, I don't think I
Okay.
have anything to add that hasn't been said already.
Okay. Well, I wanted to get off track a little bit onto something else. I kind of know your answer to the question already because we talked about it a little bit. But this seems like a good group to pose this question, and even if it's not quite on topic. So here's the question: are TTRPGs a form of art?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. What? Why are they art? What makes them art?
I
I guess that.
mean,
Oh,
yeah, go ahead, Liz.
okay. And I found myself being asked questions about like what things are a lot lately. I've had sort of a few various interviews and things where people have sort of like, well, what is a game? What is a book? What is art? What are these things? And it's like, well, I don't know. I take a bit of maybe of a sort of a soft approach to this. I know that when we talked about this on Discord previously, we were talking about. I don't know. Do you want to share that opinion about?
Sure.
Um, yeah.
Yeah. I have a friend. I won't name them here, but they basically said when it comes to TTRPGs, when we're making things, we're designing paintbrushes, not paintings. And the idea there, I think, is that that the art is going to be the story that everybody makes together. I don't know that for a fact that is what this person meant, but I will talk to them about it later and probably show them this episode so that they can, get an idea. But yeah, that was what they were saying. That paintbrushes, not paintings.
Yeah, and if that is what they meant, I think that's like a valid way to look at that. And I wouldn't disagree that the experience of playing a game and having that communal like narrative, like where you are telling a story together, I would say that is art. But I don't think that precludes the rulebook itself from being an art in its
Mm-hmm.
like gestalt form, the combination of layout, narrative, mechanics. And I think you can break it down further than that and say that individual aspects of like the writing is art, the illustration is art. I would go as far as to say the design of the mechanics itself is very much art.
Yeah, I think that like the statement implies that the art of making a paintbrush, which is that making a paintbrush isn't art, which I disagree with. Like I think making a paintbrush is art.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And I've used the same analogy actually. I think it's super useful because it like highlights the cooperative process and the sort of like long-term creative process that is TTRPGs as an art form. Lucy, a friend of mine from Split Party, really really good games critique blog y'all should check out, said it very well when she said that basically designers are asynchronous players. So yeah, I think the whole process of whatever comes from a TTRPG, from from your influences to the moment you wrote the game and did all the design to where it got to a table to whatever came out to a table, the whole thing is a long art process. It's a continuum.
Yeah,
and it's
I think
all art. Yeah.
Yeah, I think there was a key bit that you had there as well, which is like, I guess like to play devil's advocate a bit. I mean, when I went to uni, I did physics and everything, but I had a lot of friends who did art and the history of art, and I've always been kind of like hanging around like people who are heavily involved in the art community, and I know some of them will take sometimes some more hardline views on the difference between something being a craft and something being art. And they might say, for example, that the construction of a paintbrush might be a craft if you're following like a set of instructions of, how to do this. Whereas I think the difference there is if there is some meaning that you are putting into this thing, if there is intentionality and thought and something that you want to communicate through what you're doing, then that transforms it into art. And certainly, you can construct a paintbrush in an artful form. And I think when we're designing role-playing games, that is ultimately what I'm trying to do.
No, I
I think.
Please go ahead.
Fundamentally, like I never understand why anyone would be interested in arguing something as not art. Like I don't see a lot of like value there. But like in this specific instance of like, oh yeah, you're designing paintbrushes, not paintings. I understand where that's coming from. The sense of like it's a question of what they value, right? A question of what they're prioritizing in terms of their own practice. They want to create a tool. They want to create something that should be judged based on its ability to be wielded in a functional way. Like all of that, I think is like coming from like makes a lot of sense, right? Like like I think there is a sense in which like all of this stuff is like it's an analogy, but it's not a perfect analogy, and I think that's where the challenge comes from.
Yeah, and the difference between art and craft kind of, I think you kind of pointed it out there, Liz. It's the intentionality is kind of what makes it art. Like you could have an assembly line paintbrush or something, right? You probably not hard to consider that more craft than art, right? But if you're making an artisanal paintbrush out of, some kind of whatever hair you use for that, and you're doing whatever you do with the paintbrush. I don't know. I'm just making things up now. But
the original design, of the paintbrush, like it carries so much meaning, either intentional or not. I don't think I don't believe in sort of like the divide between like craft and art, or I use those words interchangeably generally, because like in the same way like a paintbrush of course then gets made in an assembly line, our games get printed in an assembly line kind of style.
Absolutely, yeah, and I would agree with you on that one. Yeah, I would agree with you on that one. It's just, sorry. No, it's just a distinction I know that some people would make, but no, I would agree with you.
Okay.
There's instrumentality to that distinction, of course, because at the end of the day, at least when I start to talk seriously with a person about this, it tells me what they like Thomas mentioned, what they value and what they don't. And that generally points to like, okay, is there a part of the process that you're not particularly interested in developing? Because that's probably what you're saying to me. If you say graphic design isn't art, well, probably your game doesn't have that much thought put on graphic design. And if I'm particularly into graphic design, I might not like your game. So it's sort of like more about the instrumentality of making the argument of something being art or not being art.
Yeah. Like I think food is always like a great like analogy here, because like I think there is like if somebody was like, oh yeah, the purpose of food is so that I can eat it, you'd be like, yeah, that's fine. Like, that makes complete sense. Like, you want to the eating is the important part. And someone was like, oh no, the important part of the food is like cooking it. Like that's what the thing is. And you're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like cooking is is clearly like important. It's what leads to the final thing. And someone is like, no. The cool part is like in like coming up with a new recipe. You're like, oh yeah, that makes sense. Like somebody has to do that. That is like a skill thing, right? Like of course that is, and you can just keep doing that. And all of this stuff is a statement of what you value. If somebody was like, yeah, I bought this item in the grocery store, but that is just a stepping stone. Like it's a means to an end. The end is me eating it. I'd be like, yeah, that is a role-playing game as well, right? Like I can buy the book, and it can be an unfulfilled promise, like till I have played it, right? That is a perfectly valid way to look at it. I think that's fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, the example of food is great, because also like it's a great way to also look at how different art forms, for example, cuisine, just have like dimensions to it that because of how the art form is valued, just don't get seen. Like, for example, there are foods that are specifically made to be shared. Like they're dishes that are made to be shared, and to create the same sort of like, the thing that we were talking about recently, like the games that are meant to be about getting people together in that way. But that's not usually a lens through which you see food and food making. And I think the question of value is a big one in TTRPGs to like see what's innovative and what isn't. I think generally what you tend to see as innovative, or what I tend to see as innovative, is the stuff that highlights what isn't usually valued in the art form. So yeah, that could be it.
Very cool.
Interesting. That's going to take me down a rabbit hole later, I think. Trying to think about what we want to bring forward that hasn't been valued or isn't as valued as we would like it to be in the TTRPG form. So one last question, then we'll just kind of on the same topic of art. Do you think that the gaming community properly recognizes TTRPGs as art? As a whole. I mean, it's hard to say about everybody, but do we view it more as art or just as like a product? I guess might be a better way to phrase that.
The TTRPG community is a bit of a contentious term.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure.
Because
It's a group of groups.
I can certainly say that like the people that are close to me see it that way. But then I've worked in corporate TTRPGs. I worked at Modifius in the UK full time several years, and I think their idea of what it means to make a TTRPGs is radically different, and they serve a completely different community, I guess. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, the thing about art and product is like it is a statement of like the process of production, right? It's a statement of like the material and the people. That's what it's being discussed. Like if a company is making like if they have like a production process that says we need 6 games in a year, so one comes out every 2 months, like like that's obviously like different, and you might have a different word for it, but it's completely different from somebody who's like, yeah, I spend 5 years working on this in my free time, and then it comes out like, yeah, we don't have great words for this, I guess, but like those are completely different things.
Things that are commodified, I guess might be the way to think about it. I don't know. Well, I hope in any case.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard question to answer. Easy one to pose, hard to answer.
Yeah.
So, on the topics of innovation and TTRPGs as art, is there anything that you would like to leave? Any thoughts you would like to leave the viewer or listener with today?
I think the only thing I had, which was like Fede was kind of getting onto this point earlier, and it's something that I very much philosophically believe in when it comes to designing games. And I wanted to chime in then, and then it sort of conversation drifted past. But Fede mentioned something interesting about not taking inspiration from other role-playing games when designing mechanics for a role-playing game, and that's something that I very much philosophically agree with when it comes to creating anything, whether it's writing literature, designing a game, artwork, whatever, or just like creating just when I'm GMing and just creating characters and a setting for some other property. But just this idea that I think if you are pulling too much from similar mediums, there is this. You get into this kind of thing where I think you're creating a copy of a copy, and it starts to degrade. You start to lose something. You fall into tropes. You start repeating things for no particularly good reason. Where actually, if you want to write a fantasy novel, you shouldn't be taking inspiration from other fantasy novels. You should be taking inspiration from history and from non-fiction and from, if your particular character is a criminal, go and read about crime fiction and things like that. But don't just copy the thing that it is. You really want to pull from a much wider spectrum of literature and different media.
Yeah,
totally. To give you an example, just chucking it out there, for Zephyr, the amount of research that I did on the anthropology of stateless people, it was a lot. And that results in mechanics that are completely different, because you start to question a lot of the stuff that you've been doing, and sort of the stuff that sort of devolves from what Liz was describing just now. It's just the self-referentiality of the art form. I don't know, I'm redesigning the first game, Nibiru, and largely taken inspiration from a book by Julian Jaynes called The Origin of Consciousness and the Breakdown of the Bicameral Mind, which basically changed the way task resolution works radically. The next Zephyr supplement is super infused of speculative realism, Graham Harman, Tim Morton, dark ecology, and it all translates in stuff that is just very non-traditional in a way, and I think that's very enriching. If you can draw from stuff outside of the circle of influences that are so deeply ingrained in space, that helps a lot if you want to do something new.
And if I can share this anecdote real quick, I asked Fede for their influences at one point, and I was expecting, they're gonna tell me a few games. Nope, they gave me a long list of anarchist philosophers who I'd never heard of. So, not that I'm much of an academic reader to begin with, but it was a little bit of a double take moment. It was.
Yeah, you mentioned you had a bat at your house.
Yeah, I had a bat at my house too. Yeah.
Yeah, and I was like, I'm designing a game that's based on Thomas Nagel's paper. What's it like to be a bat? Which is about consciousness and stuff like that. Yeah. Sorry, Tom.
Please go ahead.
Yeah, I had a few people just like asking about inspirations for you or die in this place on like Blue Sky. So I posted just like a photo of a stack of books that were quite a big influence behind what I'd been designing. And yeah, there was not a single role-playing game in there. I think Starfish by Peter Watts was in there twice, which is just a joke on my part. But yeah.
All right.
Yeah. Closing thoughts. I think there's been a lot of the discussion on innovation role-playing games tends to be, like, I mean, there's a general lot of discussion tends to be really weird. Like, I think people tend to have this sense of like uh, depending on their age and like when they were most active in the hobby, like that's the period that they attribute like being the golden age of the hobby. Like the period which that they know the most about is the period in which the most exciting things are happening. So there is this weird thing of like in the current moment when there is like and it's the same for me, right? I know the most about this current moment, and I think it is the most interesting period that we've ever had in role-playing games. So like if you are the kind of person that does, like I said, kind of enjoy novelty and is interested in like different like aesthetic experiences, like yeah, there has never been a better time, and there are a lot of people who are like that, and there are communities full of people like that. I urge you to like find them and um, like play these games and play them outside of what is kind of like commercially uh, successful or trendy right now. Though at the same time, a lot of those games are also really fun to play, and they do solve that thing of like you actually have like a common connection with somebody and
Yeah.
things like that. So yeah, but yeah, please, if you are that kind of person, find those communities and play these games. They're great.
And maybe one of an easy way to do that would be to we're going to move into plugs now. Would be to go to your newsletter.
Yeah, I can go first. Yeah.
Yeah, please go ahead.
You
Please
can
go ahead.
find you can find my newsletter at www.ttrpg.in. It's weekly. You can find a link to my podcast there as well, and you can find Rascal News at rascal.news, and that's a website that mostly covers indie role playing games, a little bit of miniatures, but yeah, that's my day job, and it's a good site.
Absolutely. I am also a subscriber to Rascal News. Yeah.
Yeah, you mind me just like expanding a bit on the whole thing?
Oh yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, because I think like we mentioned like the influences and stuff like that. But I think that a really cool thing to do if you like the idea of innovating or coming with something new, which I think is very enriching by itself, is trying to sort of like question, like posit questions to the play elements. The stuff that you're used to identifying as a play element in TTRPGs. A character sheet, a task resolution system. Like what really are these things? I think it's very useful. Like to me, like for example, looking at a character sheet and saying, like this is how the game wants me to build an identity, was very informative, because then I saw like, oh, okay, the character sheet that I'm looking at is full of like number sort of like mathematized ways of tracking how good I do things. And then I look at myself and my life and my identity and how I perceive myself, and I'm like, I almost never think of myself in terms of like what I can and cannot do. So why am I mechanizing this in this way? Can the character sheet just mean something different? And the same with task resolution. Like it's kind of wild to me that like you enter into like groups or Discord servers or places where people go to like get advice on how to start creating like a system. And so like the first question you always get is like, what dice should I be using, or what role should I be doing? And I'm like, is that really the first question? I mean, it can be right if you want to do the same thing that a lot of people are doing, but for example, task resolution is basically it's taken as sort of like the foundation of so many systems in the traditional thing. And it's basically a question of power. It's the basis of a power fantasy. It's like what we're mathematizing is whether you can or cannot do that. And because you're mathematizing that, all of the systems that are built on top of that are about making more complex that question, about building complexity on that. And that builds you power fantasies. But instead, if you say, you actually get to pick whether you're successful or not, but the dice result is actually going to tell you the way in which you do something. Maybe a number represents a philosophy of going about doing something, and a different number represents a different way of doing it. Well, now we're talking about means, and the path of mechanized character progression becomes about you trying to do stuff by your own code of ethics, for example, instead of you trying to do stuff by whatever means possible. And I think that, questioning game elements in that way, I think is very productive and very enriching towards innovation. It's just something that,
that's a really good one. Yeah, so I've become very much into just this idea of how can I convey some kind of meaning and feeling through the mechanics. And I don't know, with the whole dice question, it's like, I don't know, maybe it's kind of like my background in physics and mathematics, whatever. It's like there are so many different ways that you can generate statistical outcomes for things. It's like it doesn't really matter what dice I use or how I go about doing that. I know that statistically there's a way that I can kind of make it work. So it becomes more about what feeling is actually evoked by using this particular mechanism of coming up with that statistical solution. It's like, how does it feel to roll a big handful of dice versus just rolling one dice, or using a deck of cards to do something? And is there something that you can actually tell mechanically through this? Like you're using mechanics to tie into the narrative.
All right. Well, I did tell you at the very beginning, feel free to surprise me, and you managed to do it several times during this podcast, so I appreciate it. Liz, do you want to go ahead and tell people where they can find you, or your stuff?
I don't know. Search for Liz Shrike Studio on Google, or I guess You Will Die in This Place at the moment, because that's probably going to get more hits because people seem to be more interested in that at the moment. I do make other games as well, and I'm making other games at the moment too, but I don't know, if you look for it, you'll find it.
Cool. All right. Thank you, Liz. And Fede.
My website is oracana.com, which is, I guess, in the screen. You can find that stuff. And Zephyr is really the game that, I'm most excited about, talking about generally. But Nibiru and a new edition is coming soon, so there's a Kickstarter sign-up thing for it.
Cool. That's it. All right, folks, this has been another episode of Round the Table, this one about TTRPG innovators, games on the bleeding edge. I want to thank all my guests for being here once again, and thank you for watching, viewer. We will catch you at the next one. Bye, everybody.